says here, finding peace in a stressed out, digitally dependent culture may just be a matter of thinking differently. This is an article by Kate Pickard. I really like magazines that focus on stress reduction and mindfulness. I have quite a few of them, so I look forward to sharing them with you. The raisins sitting in my sweaty palm are getting stickier by the minute. They don't look particularly appealing, but when instructed by my teacher, I take one in my finger and examine it. I notice that the raisin's skin glistens. Looking closer, I see a small indentation where it once hung from the vine. Eventually, I place it in my mouth and roll the wrinkly little shape over and over with my tongue, feeling its texture. Once, after a while, I push it up against my teeth and slice it open. Then finally I chew. I'm eating a raisin, but for the first time in my life, I'm doing it differently. I'm doing it mindfully. The whole experience might seem silly, but we're in the midst of a popular obsession with mindfulness as a secret to health and happiness, and a growing body of evidence suggests that it has clear benefits. The class that I'm taking is part of a curriculum called Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction, MBSR, developed in 1979 by John Kabat-Zinn, an MIT-educated scientist. There are nearly 1,000 certified MBSR instructors teaching mindfulness techniques, including meditation, and they are in nearly every state and more than 30 countries. The raisin exercise reminds us how hard it is to think about just one thing at a time. Technology has made it easier than ever to fracture attention into smaller and smaller bits. We answer a colleague's questions from the stands at a child's soccer game. We pay the bills while watching TV. We read news on our smartphone while talking to a friend. In a time where no one seems to understand, have enough time, our device allows us to be at multiple places at once, but at any cost, being unable to fully inhabit the place where we actually want to be. Mindfulness experts say we can do better. At one level, the techniques associated with the philosophy are intended to help practitioners quiet a busy mind, becoming more aware of the present moment and less caught up in what happened earlier or what's to come. Many cognitive therapists recommend it to patients as a way to help cope with anxiety and depression. More broadly, it's seen as a means to deal with stress, but to view mindfulness simply as the latest self-help fad underplays its potency and misses the point of why it is gaining acceptance with those who might otherwise dismiss mental training techniques closely tied to meditation. Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, Fortune 500 titans, Pentagon chiefs, and more. If distraction is the preeminent condition of our age, then mindfulness is in the eyes of its enthusiasts, is the most logical response. Its strength lies in the its universality. Though meditation is considered an essential means to achieving mindfulness, the ultimate goal is to simply she was struggling. One man, a social worker, said that he needed help dealing with the stress of working with clients, trying to get their lives on track. Although I signed up to learn what mindfulness was about, I had my own stressors I hoped the course might alleviate. As a working parent of a toddler, I found life in my household increasingly hectic, and like many, I was hyper-connected. I have a personal iPhone and another one for work, along with a desktop computer at the office, and a laptop and iPad at home. It's rare that I let an hour go by without looking at a screen. Powering down the internal urge to keep in constant touch with the outside world is not easy. At the start of each 2-hour MBSR class, our teacher, a slight woman named Paulette Gaff, hit 2 small brass symbols together to indicate that we should begin meditating. During this agonizing, frustrating period, which lasted up to 40 minutes, I would try to focus on my breath, as Paulette advised, but I felt constantly bombarded with my thoughts about my family, random sounds in the room, and even how I would translate each evening's session into this story. One evening, we were introduced to mindful walking in our small meeting room. We formed a circle and paced together. Feel your heel make contact with the floor, then the ball of your foot, there's a monthly magazine called Mindful, a stack of best-selling books, and a growing number of smartphone apps devoted to this concept. For Stuart Silverman, mindfulness has become a way to deal with the 24/7 pace of his job consulting with financial advisors. Silverman receives hundreds of emails and phone calls every day. "I'm nuts about being in touch," he says. Anxiety in the financial industry reached a high mark in 2008 meltdown, but even after the crisis began to abate, Silverman found that the high stress level remained. So in 2011, he took a group of his clients on a mindfulness retreat. The group left their smartphones behind and spent 4 days at a resort in the Catskills in upstate New York, meditating, participating in group discussions, sitting in silence, practicing yoga, and eating meals quietly. For just about everybody there, it was a life-changing experience, says Silverman. The Catskills program was run by Janice Marchirano, a former vice president at General Mills, who began a corporate mindfulness initiative where they left the company in 2011 to run an organization she started called the Institute for Mindful Leadership. About 500 General Mills employees have participated in mindfulness classes since Marchirano introduced the concept to the company's top managers in 2006. And there is a meditation room in every building at the company's Minneapolis campus. Marchirano, who ran a well-attended mindfulness training session at Davos in 2013, and wrote a book called Finding the Space to Lead, a practical guide to mindful leadership, says most leaders she encounters feel besieged by long work hours and near constant connectivity. For these people, there seems to be no time to zero in on what's important or to plan ahead. There's evidence they're correct. Researchers have found that multitasking leads to lower overall productivity. Students and workers who constantly and rapidly switch between tasks have less ability to filter out irrelevant information, and they make more mistakes. And many corporate workers today find it impossible to take breaks. According to a recent survey, more than half of employed American adults check work messages on the weekends, and 4 in 10 do so while on vacation. It's hard to unwind when your boss or employees know you're just a smartphone away. The technology has gone beyond what we are capable of handling, says Marchirano. It might seem paradoxical, then, that Silicon Valley has become a hotbed of mindfulness classes and conferences. Wisdom 2.0, an annual mindfulness gathering for tech leaders, started in 2009 with 325 attendees, and organizers hosted more than 3,000 at this event, where participants heard from John Kabat-Zinn, along with executives from Twitter and Facebook. Google, meanwhile, has an in-house mindfulness program called Search Inside Yourself. The 7-week course was started by a Google engineer and is offered 4 times a year on the company's Mountain View, California campus. Through the course, thousands of Googlers have learned attention-focusing techniques, including meditation, meant to help them free up mental space for creativity and big thinking. It makes sense in a way that engineers who write code often talk about being in symptoms. Kabat-Zinn speculated mindfulness training might help patients refocus their attention so they could change their response to pain and thereby reduce their overall suffering. With 3 physicians, Kabat-Zinn opened a stress reduction clinic at UMass based on meditation and mindfulness. It was just a little pilot on $0, he says. Almost immediately, some of the clinic's patients reported that their pain levels diminished, and for others, the pain remained the same, but the mindfulness training made them better able to handle the stress of life with illness. They were able to separate their day-to-day experiences from their identity as pain patients. That's what you most hope for, says Kabat-Zinn. Not that you can cure all disease, but that you could help people live in a way that doesn't erode their quality of life beyond a certain point. Eventually, Kabat-Zinn's program was absorbed into the UMass Department of Medicine and became the MBSR curriculum now used by hundreds of teachers across the country. In the years since, scientists have been able to prove that meditation and rigorous mindfulness training can lower cortisol levels and blood pressure, increase immune response, and possibly even affect gene expression. Scientific study is also showing that meditation can have an impact on the structure of the brain itself. mindfulness retreat led by John Kabat-Zinn in 2008, shortly after the election. Ryan turned over his 2 phones and ended the experience with a 36-hour period of silence. My mind got so quiet, and I had the experience of my mind and my body actually being in the same place at the same time, synchronized, says Ryan. I went up to John and said, "Oh man, we need to study this, get it into the schools and healthcare systems." In the years since, the congressman has become a rock star among mindfulness evangelists. His book, A Mindful Nation, was published in 2012, and Mindful launched in May 2013, which put Ryan on the cover of its second issue after he secured $1 million in federal grants to teach mindfulness in schools in his home district. Ryan hosted meditation sessions and a mindfulness lecture series on Capitol Hill for House members and their staff. The effort, says Ryan, is all about little candles getting lit under the Capitol dome. Elizabeth Stanley, an associate professor at Georgetown, is trying to do the same for those in uniform. Stanley, an Army intelligence officer deployed to the Balkans in the early 1990s. After she left active duty, she enrolled in a doctoral program at Harvard and pursued a MBA at MIT at the same time, planning a career studying national security issues. But as the demands of 2 graduate programs combined with leftover stress from her time deployed, Stanley found herself unable to cope. I realized my body and nervous system were constantly stuck on high, she says. She underwent therapy and started practicing yoga and mindful meditation, eventually completing both her degree programs as well. On a long retreat in 2004, I realized I wanted to pull these 2 sides of me together and find a way to share these techniques with men and women in uniform, Stanley says. She teamed up with Amishi Jha, a neuroscientist at the University of Miami who studies attention, and together they launched a pilot study with private funding investigating a mindfulness program could make Marines more resilient in stressful combat situations. The findings were so promising, according to Jha, that the Department of Defense awarded them $1 million in grants to investigate further using an MBSR-based curriculum. Stanley developed mindfulness-based mind fitness training. Stanley has been involved in 2 additional mindfulness studies with the Marines since, and Jha has been awarded $3.4 million more in federal grants to study how mindfulness training affects other populations, including undergraduates facing exams and accountants slogging through tax season. Educators are turning to mindfulness with increasing frequency, perhaps a good thing considering how digital technology is splitting kids' attention spans too. The average American teen sends and receives more than 3,000 text messages a month. A Bay Area-based program called Mindful Schools offers mindfulness training to teachers, instructing them how to equip children to concentrate in classrooms and deal with the stress. Launched in 2007, the program has reached more than 750,000 pupils and educators in more than 100 countries, and all 50 states have taken its course online. It was always my intention that mindfulness move into mainstream, says Kabat-Zinn, whose MBSR Bible, Full Catastrophe Living, was published in